Okay, welcome everybody to London Vegans. We are here usually on the last Wednesday of each month.
If you think differently, put it in the chat, and we can talk about it. But we'll have a good debate about it, no doubt. So I've had many awards for the work I do, and this is just a very small smattering of the ones we've had. I didn't expect to get any of these. But I got them, and I'm really proud. You know, there's Food and Drink Awards, Pest Control Service of the Year Award in Scotland, which was a really big scoop for us because we've been making the waves in the pest control industry. We even get lethal controllers asking me how they can solve a solution non-lethally, including for creatures like mink, which they typically would just kill without thinking. But when they're pressured by their clients to find non-lethal methods, the pest controllers usually contact me, and I've been very open about the work I do with them. Some agree, some disagree, some respect that the stance I've taken. But we do get them asking me questions about how we do the way we do our work. And if I can make them even just do one job where they're not killing anything, then that's a win as well. So that Pest Control Service of the Year Award in 2021 was the first time in the awards history that's ever been won by a non-lethal pest control company. Not just that, by a vegan pest control company. And they were very unhappy, and I was very proud because it showed that we were making really big differences in the industry, and it just showed that people are watching and they're listening and taking heed of the work we're doing, because we've done a lot in our 10 plus years of work. So how we help animals. So I do believe our approach is revolutionary. I'm going to give you a little background to the very early days. So I got made redundant from my job helping people, and I wanted to do something I was really what I really loved and really could put my passion into, because I didn't want to have to work for other people ever again. And I was watching Fox Wars, I think it was on Channel 4 all these years ago, and I wanted to help foxes because at the time they estimated thousands, if not tens of over 10,000 foxes were being killed in urban areas in the UK every year. And I wanted to stop that. Absolutely love foxes, and I wanted to try and impact on that. And I come across the late John Bryan, who had written many books about living with urban wildlife and trying to deal with urban wildlife. And I contacted him and said, look, I want to do this. You seem to be the person to speak to. Can you guide me? And he did an amazing job at guiding me to set up and get going. And in his words, he was really chuffed I was there, because he saw it as him passing the baton to me to carry on the fight for our urban and rural wildlife. And I think it grew even bigger than he could ever imagined at the moment from all the work we've done. That led me on to just growing the business and doing more services and just trying to help as many people as I could, because every time I'm helping people, when they're coming to me, I'm helping wildlife and saving those lives. I don't just do all the research and working with policies and licenses, but I also pick a charity. We've not picked one so far this year, but we pick charities that we can support their work. And so what I was doing with our consultations, I would give either 5 or 10% of every consultation, and that money would go into a pot. And then at the end of the year, I would give that to support other amazing wildlife and animal charities, everything from the Velvet Monkey Foundation, Born Free, the Fox Project, the Caris and Maggie Fleming Animal Hospice up here in Scotland. So I'd like to give back, because I think it's really important that we support each other when we're trying to fight for our wildlife. And it is a fight for our wildlife. As we know, the UK is one of the most nature depleted countries in Europe. Scotland is, I believe it's 212 out of 240 when it comes to nature depletion. So it's really bad up here. So where I can work with other organisations, where we can jointly help other groups and campaigns which help wildlife, we will always do that, because it's something I'm really proud of, is giving back to other people. Because I've been there when the business was small and I needed people to support me, and people did. And now I'm in a position where I can support others. I do that. I do that regularly. So overcoming wildlife conflicts. If you all think about this for a moment, we've probably all had a wildlife conflict in our lives. It could be mice in your homes, wasps in the shed or the attic, a good old ratty foraging in the gardens. And a lot of the time, nothing needs to be done. But when you're dealing with people, and the majority of my clients are not even vegan, so when I'm dealing with these conflicts, you often will find people just want a non-lethal alternative without causing harm, and it can be done. So, for example, about 60% of my clients are non-vegan. So these people are coming to me not because they're vegan or because I'm vegan. They're coming to me because I can offer them a alternative where they don't have to kill something. And that's just basic compassion. And everyone has that in them. Or at least I hope everyone has that in them. So by just having the service here, I'm helping not just vegans and wildlife, but I'm helping other people. And when I'm helping these people, I'm also showing them that there is a different way to deal with wildlife conflicts where you don't need to harm them. So what kind of services do I provide? So you can see is a list of different services we offer. So my jobs are ranged from helping governments with conflicts, and that's been in South Africa and here in Scotland and in England. I've done movie studios, I do restaurants, I do shops, I do big high street stores. I've done art centres and people's homes. So there's everything that you can imagine where a conflict may occur that I will help. And that's been at livery yards, it's been on farms. So we offer those services in a wide range just so we can make sure that anyone who needs our help or even just wants advice, that I can be there to give them that help. Now, these services are broken down, as you can see the list here, like remote consultations. So I've done these all over the world, from Nepalese mountains for a Buddhist monk who had rats eating his vegetables who wanted my help, to skunks in America, to wolves in Canada, baboons in South Africa, fire ants in Sweden, to all the kind of species you can imagine here we get in the UK. So even if I get a job coming over that I don't really understand the species, I found a way to cross-reference, you know, like a coyote with a fox. There's very similarities with the two species, so I can cross-reference and use the same tactics for different species. So even if there's a species I've never dealt with before, using my vast experience of wildlife and the work that I do, I can usually find a solution to these problems. I do on-site assessments, so that could just be me going to a place. I was in an amazing community project in the Docklands of London last week, and they wanted me to assess their building for rat entry points, which I did, and I was really proud to assist them in that work. So that was a really lovely job. I do full exclusion and proofing services. So this could be, for example, if you had mice in your flat, I will mouse proof your home from the inside. So the mice will 9 times out of 10 be living within the walls of the building. So if we proof the inside, it just means the mice then get the chance to go back out the way they came in and then not affect people in their living spaces. And that's been a really, really successful technique that we use with the proofing there. Relocation, something we have as a tool, is something we very rarely use. Usually the exclusion proofing means we never need to do relocation. Relocation is not a simple thing to be done, and shouldn't ever be done lightly. You need to really research where species are being taken to. They need to make sure they're not going to come into conflict with other people, that they've got a good potential food source, a water source, harborage, and that they're not going to have a big impact on their surroundings in a new place. So you've got to really put the welfare first for relocation. So it's something that we will do as a last resort when it comes to animals. And some animals we won't do that at all for them. It's mainly rodents that we will relocate if it really needs it. And the last thing I do is educational talks. Similar to this, I do talks for universities, for colleges, for community groups, environmental groups, at vegan festivals. I've done all the vegan festivals, I think, just about. with the bigger ones. And that's just educating people, letting more people know that there is a non-lethal vegan alternative to pest control out there, and that we can help people when these conflicts occur. So some of the species we cover here, so this is kind of our bread and butter, if you like. Rats, mice, birds, moles, insects, foxes, cats, squirrels. And you'll probably think cats is quite a weird one. And I'll just do a quick little story on the cat ones. So quite a few years going back, in my hometown in Harwich, there was a spate of cat killings. And I've got qualifications in cat and feline behavior and psychology. And I joined the group because that's my hometown I grew up in, and I joined their Facebook group about all the people who lost their cats. And I asked other people to send me the exact location where they lived, where the cat was found. And by putting all this information together and understanding the cat's behavior, I was able to pinpoint 3 houses in a row on this street. And working with the RSPCA and the police down in Essex, I said one of these 3 houses is going to be where your cat killer is. And right enough, the police ended up raiding the middle house, and they caught the guy who was killing the cats, and the cat killing stopped. And that was partly due to me helping out with understanding, where the cat's movements, basically, whether they're male or female, whether they're neutered or not, whether they went far or stayed close, and where they lived. But we were able to help the police find where this cat killer was and get that stopped. So because of that, I wanted to understand why people took actions like that against cats, and it's because they couldn't find someone to give them advice or a solution to a cat fouling in their garden or chasing the birds from their bird feeders. So we started a cat service to try and eliminate people's frustrations at having cats in their gardens, so they didn't have to resort to lethal or cruel methods. It's not a one that we do very often, but we do get the odd occasional person wanting us to help with cats. And like I said before, I've done all sorts of species all over the world. And I won't turn away a job. I'll always try and help, no matter what the species, no matter where it is. Because if I can, 1, educate the people, or 2, just help those animals, then there's something I'm going to want to do. So pest control is a really awful industry. It has huge impacts on wildlife and pets and the local environment. And for decades, you imagine how many years people have been putting poison outside around their businesses, in their homes, to deal with rats or mice. The problem is it doesn't solve the issues. It doesn't work. Down in London, the pest control industry themselves believe it's about 95% resistant to the strongest rodenticides now. So by them putting poison down, if they're not killing them, they're just feeding them. And if they're not killing them, they're also attracting them into areas because the poisons are no longer working. So our services really are more important now than ever. So when you get pest control companies putting bait boxes down, these bait boxes are made to attract rodents into them. So if you had a business and you never had rats before, and pest control comes and says, we want to put bait boxes all the way around the outside of your business, and you never had rats, it will most likely draw them in, because these bait boxes are designed to encourage them to come in. And then if they're putting bait in there, you'll end up with if the rats don't die for the bait, then you'll just end up with them feeding there and staying in there and being attracted to the area more. So these old methods don't work. And here's a really good one from London. So in Victoria Station, I had a client who had mice coming in. And Victoria Station has a huge mouse problem. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're mainly out the back. But I went out the back of my client's business, and there was a bin area. In the bin area, there was about 16 bait boxes almost back to back going around the area. And as I opened the door, I saw 8 mice run everywhere. So I demanded that the Victoria Station mall manager come down, and I explained to him, look, if you've got 16 bait boxes and you've still got 8 mice, what does that tell you? And he went, well, we need more bait boxes. And I went, what do you mean you need more bait boxes? You've got 16 bait boxes and you've got 8 mice running past me in broad daylight. That tells you poison's not working and you need to make changes. I think it fell on deaf ears. I gave them a really, really good telling that what they're doing is not working and they should really just get rid of their pest controller, because he's failing them and charging them thousands of pounds a year for not doing the job he's meant to do. But that was a good example showing them, and I do wish they would have just listened and changed, but sadly they didn't. So we couldn't have any impact there. But that was a good example how poisons really don't work. So with bait boxes, we're looking for a university. We do work with universities on different projects, but we're trying to find universities to investigate bait boxes, because I believe when they're put outside around buildings, they create ecological dead zones. So these bait boxes are not just killing target species, they're going to kill shrews and voles, which are protected. It's completely illegal to poison them. It affects hedgehogs and the slugs and snails, which feed off the bait, which then get eaten by the hedgehogs. So it impacts on hedgehogs. It impacts on birds, cats, dogs, birds of prey, sorry. And so it has a huge impact on the local environment. I personally feel there should be no outside baiting at all. I know the law is changing in January 2026, where no bait boxes are allowed to be away from the edge of a solid structure. To me, I think that needs to go further and a complete ban. Now, the weird thing about that is the actual pest control industry who are bringing those changes in, and it's because they've been pressured by pressure groups, animal welfare groups, because they found in some cases over 90% of barn owls in areas where using rodenticides either died of rodenticide poisoning or had high levels in their system and would therefore die eventually as well. So it was showing that outside bait boxes are really awful. Now, this little chart here, this is this lovely pie chart you'll see. So there was an organization in the Netherlands, as you can see by my diagram, who put bait boxes around the outside of buildings. And what they did, they used non-poison grain, so just grain, you get grain with poison laced through it. This grain was just normal grain, and then they put cameras on all the bait boxes. Now, if you look at this was all the different animals which visited those bait boxes. So you're looking here and you're seeing, let's have a look at house mice. Well, one thing you're not allowed is it's illegal to poison house mice outside, just in case you didn't know. So just have a look how many mice out there. So wood mice, they could probably legally get away with. There's no rats on there. So if you take that, let's take that little wood mouse sliver, and that's probably going to be about 6%, maybe less than that, of the species that visited that bait box were the target species. Now, if that's that small, 6% roughly of a species visiting a bait box, which they're allowed to kill, that's a huge 90+% species illegally being poisoned. And this has, like I said, huge consequences against all sorts of animals, including cats, and even the cat visited that one. And all these species here are protected from being poisoned. You're not allowed to do it, yet it happens. Everywhere you see a bait box outside and this happens, a crime is happening. But because there's no case study for the wildlife crime teams in police forces all around the UK, they're never interested in taking it further. So a little bit nicer slides now, I guess, getting away from the horribleness of poisons. So here's some numbers about the work I've done. So I've been saving wildlife over 10 years. I've helped over 6,800 clients in that time, which is a lot of animals, covering 30 different countries from 5 different continents with 75 different species, and 138 different countries or regions globally, which is amazing. We have this weird reach. Like, we're really popular in India and Germany and Australia, where people get in contact regularly asking us for their help. And it's really nice that the message is spreading. So we hope that message continues to spread. And we are in the process of setting up our very first franchise, which is going to be in London. And once that's done, we're then going to be opening a franchise up in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, because we want to get back over to Europe and offer our services over there. For those who don't know, the Netherlands are famous for their mice, and they do have a big mouse problem. And we have been speaking to vegan businesses over in Amsterdam who we're hoping to work with in the future, where we can base ourselves out of and take our services over there and spread our message even further. So one of the big research projects I was telling you about earlier on was our Scottish Gold trial. Now, this was a huge success, and it started with me going to a business it was a mosque in the central belt of Scotland, and they had 2 gold chicks on the roof. They couldn't have them there because they needed a maintenance team to do work, but it had to have them removed. So I applied for a license with the Scottish government, and to my horror, the license only allowed me to kill those chicks. There was no other alternative. So I contacted the Scottish government and said, look, I'm not going to kill these birds. I think it's wrong. These are red-listed herring gulls, by the way, the 2 birds. And they said, well, that's the license. You're going to have to do this. Otherwise, you'll be in breach of your license and you'll be liable for prosecution. So I said, well, I'm not going to kill them. I'm taking them to Wildlife Rescue Centre. If you want to prosecute me, go ahead. I'm doing this willingly. I written an email saying I'm going to do this. I don't care if you prosecute me because I think you'll be laughed out of court, basically. And I think that made them question that the system wasn't working. And so I then contacted them after the goal season and said, look, this can't be the way. There has to be an alternative. And I asked them to let me set up a trial, which I did. And this trial was to show the Scottish government that you didn't have to kill all these birds. And just to give you an idea, in 4 years in Scotland alone, this was going for 2021, it was 2020, 21, 22 and 23, just of one species, so the herring gull, which is red listed, the Scottish government allowed 74,000 eggs to be destroyed. Now let that sink in. This is of a red listed bird in decline, 74,000 eggs, which is absolutely just ridiculous. So our trial was greatly needed. And we had 474 chicks, 474 eggs, 82 chicks come in from 15 different pest controllers. And we had to get lethal controllers on board, which I did a really good job of doing that. Of those eggs, 299 eggs were successfully hatched at rescue centres. And then 337 chicks were eventually released back into the wild. And a full report, as you can see, is on our website. You can look at that under the Goal Helpline tab and read all our details into our report. But we had such a high success rate. It was actually higher than natural rates of gulls. We still do lots of gull research. We have a fantastic factory site in the middle of Glasgow, which allow us to do non-lethal deterrence work and other research on gull numbers and ringing of gulls, so we can monitor them and their numbers and how the populations are doing. So our trial was such a success that the government actually brought a new part of the licensing. They gave us a whole new section. So when people apply for that license, they now have the option to take these gulls to rescue centres instead of killing them, which is really, really good. And they also changed their policies because we found through the trial that there were massive crimes being, like huge crimes. If you'd have done, you'd probably end up in prison. Wildlife crimes taking place where pest controllers were killing day-old chicks, let them suffocate in bags. They were taking eggs of species that you'd never ever get a license for, and we had to bring all this to the government and say, look, you need to change this because things ain't working. So in the end, they listened and they have implemented these changes, although they're still issuing too many licenses to kill chicks, take eggs and kill adult birds across Scotland. And it's something we are still actively working at. And we have a big FOI investigation we're doing at the moment into this issue across the whole of the UK. And it's going to hopefully go to the media in the coming months so we can shame them again into taking more action to change this. Here's some of the eggs and the chicks. I don't know if you can see my tattoo on my arm. That egg there is the patterned, funny little marble patterned one there. And the little chick you see on my arm is the one sitting down with his legs splayed on the yellow blanket in the middle. They had such a big effect on me. I had a tattooed commission to celebrate the work we did. There's actually 5 cheeky little gulls at the top. There was no room in the rescue centre, so they had to come and live in my flat with me under license until there was enough room and they were big enough to go to the rescue. And I remember doing an interview for the Guardian newspaper, and during the interview, he could hear them shouting at me because they wanted more food. But this was them on their first day back into the wildlife rescue, enjoying the sunshine on the grass. And the one on the right wasn't very happy because I was about to leave and he didn't want me to go. And they were attached to me, but they lose that attachment really quick. And they all got released back into the wild, these ones. So I'll just give you some funny stories, just so we're not ending on any horrible notes. I come across a lot of funny stories, and I'm hopefully going to write a book about these stories because I think they'll be a joy to watch. So I'll go through Mr. Moo and his merry family. So I had a client from High Wycombe contact me. They had mice in the house, and it got to a point one day that the lady was getting out of bed and she went to put her slippers on, and there was a new mouse nest in her slippers, and she was like, right, it's got to the point where there was mice everywhere and something had to happen. So she contacted me to ask my help. The story of Mr. Moo is she used to go down to have breakfast at a breakfast table every morning, and a little black and white mouse. She said it was black and white. It wasn't a domestic mouse. He was like a little cow, she said, and she had no idea how he got in the house or why there was a black and white little mouse into her home. But she called him Mr. Moo, and she would share breakfast with him every morning. Then he'll scamper off and disappear into the house. Well, one morning she went down, and Mr. Moo was there. And Mr. Moo brought along all these mini moos. So he brought along the whole family of baby mice to come and have breakfast with her. And she later on told me as well, she was in a living room one evening, and a gerbil just randomly appeared in the middle of the room and hopped down the hallway, and she never ever saw it again. She never had any pet gerbils or mice, so we have no idea where the gerbil come from or where it went. It just, she had I think it was a magical rodent portal in her house where these rodents would just appear out of nowhere and just come and join her. They must have known she was the right person to go and live with. Another one was the love rat. So this was in Edinburgh. I had clients who had pet rats. They loved their rats. And in their garden, they had a shed. And under that shed lived one little rat. And we believe he got wind of the girls, because there were girl rats that were living in, that my client had as pets, through the open window. And the rat actually decided he was going to go across to the other garden. He went up a tree. He climbed on the roof. He chewed under a tile. He dropped down into the neighbours. He chewed through the wall. He got into my clients when he dropped onto their skylight. He didn't go over the skylight, and he chewed through into the cupboard where of the room where the domestic rats were. And then he chewed a hole out of the cupboard to go and see the rats. And he would go all that way. So from the garden, from the shed up the tree to the neighbours, across to their roof, into the cupboard, down into the bedroom to go and visit the 4 domestic rats that he so dearly wanted to mate with and caught. But we had to deny him his little love triangle, sadly, and block off all the routes. But that was a really, really cute story. And I like telling that one because a lot of people think the impression, I guess, especially the media, paint rats as horrible, evil, diseased creatures, when really they are probably one of the most intelligent, complex, socially amazing species I get to work with. And I have an absolute affinity for rats and just how incredible they are. The last one is rolling in it, the fox lady. I had a client who didn't want foxes in her garden, and because they were fouling, they were just passing through and fouling in her garden. And she was so livid that with the foxes being there, she was demanding I went there and cleaned up the fox mess and stopped them getting in, because she wanted to roll around on her grass. This lady was in the 70s, and I don't know how many 70-year-olds like to roll around on the grass, but she has every right to want to do that. But she was so angry at me. She was saying she was going to go and roll in the fox mess if I didn't come and remove it. To which I said, "I'm sorry, we don't offer that service, but do enjoy your garden." So she was a fun client. She didn't like foxes, but we talked about taking any lethal actions against the foxes, and that was a fun one. We've got, I'll say, tons more stories that we are going to be putting in a book and at some point publishing for people to read. So summing up, I hope I've not bored everyone, and I hope you're all still awake. If you have a wildlife conflict, or know someone that does have a wildlife conflict, be it a neighbour, a family member, a friend in America, or it doesn't matter where they are, or even a place of work or business that you run, and you want someone to help solve that in a non-lethal, ethical, vegan way, I'm your guy. Find me on any of our social medias and get in touch. Especially for businesses, we don't just react to when people need us. We go and proof premises even before there's an issue arising. So yeah, it's, if I can help people with their wildlife issues and make the world a better place by meaning people don't need to use poisons and no animals need to die, then this is my life mission, and it's a joy to do this and to help people and to help wildlife. So I'll leave you with a very cross blue tit who was rescued and on his way to wildlife rescue, decided he was going to squeeze out the box and pose for a lovely photo. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I'm going to stop sharing and open up the floor to any questions.
Okay, let's just add on spotlight. Oh, thanks ever so much. Well, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. You've got an absolute passion there. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, you can actually put them in the chat box or just raise your hand, and happy to take them live. Got a couple coming through on there. That's John. Hopefully okay to add you on the video. Let me just add spotlight. Hi, John. Hi there. Can you unmute yourself, please? Yeah, oh, you have to unmute, please, John. That's it. Start again. That's it.
Yep. Right. Yeah, so fascinating talk.
Thank you.
And this is a slightly unusual question for you. You mentioned wolves. I've heard that Scotland is toying with the idea of reintroducing wolves to Scotland. Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
I'll take that question as well, John. It's okay.
Well, it's I've actually I work quite closely with the organisations who are actually trying to bring about those changes. In fact, my partner, also a vegan, she is going to be in London next month presenting a film called Why Not Scotland, which is about rewilding. She travelled all over Europe looking at this big issue of bringing back lynx and wolves, and yeah. So I think it's a really good idea. I think we need it. Sadly, at the moment, they cull many deer, not just in Scotland, but across the whole of the UK, because we've removed that apex predator. Now, I think the way that we're going to see it, John, is that we're going to see lynx come back first. Seen from my partner's film when she went to go look at lynx project in Poland. Of all the lynx they released, 95% are never seen again, and these lynx go off into the wilds, and they help bring down deer numbers, but also help move deer on. The biggest issue with deer is the overgrazing. So wolves and lynx, I think, are needed because at least that will stop the culling and the sports culling that they do up here in Scotland. And I think wolves would be absolutely fine to bring back. There's smaller countries in Scotland which have them in the higher density human populations where they coexist really well. So the rooms here, we just need political movement and support to make that happen. I think it will be a fantastic idea. How about you, John? What's your thoughts about wolves coming back?
Well, as far as I know, I've Googled it a few times. How many people have ever been killed by wolves? As far as I know, none ever. So, so based on that, I'm all in favour of it.
Yeah, me too. And the biggest opposition is going to come from farmers, to be honest. And that's the stopping block for lynx at the moment. However, groups like Scotland, the Big Picture up here, who are rewilding champions in Scotland, are amazing. They have been taking farmers who have concerns to areas across Europe where there's lynx and there's farmers, and shown they coexist really well. So it's about changing those minds. And we're kind of lucky up here in Scotland. We've got a lot of really big rewilding farmers and landowners who are now getting on board with the rewilding of Scotland, because a lot of people think Scotland's wild and beautiful and really natural, but we're not. We're a very nature depleted country. Even the Highlands are bare. You see photos of the massive hills and the Highlands, and they're all empty and barren. It's been scraped of any life, of any tree cover which would have been there. The rivers have been managed to the point that they're straight and can't function properly. So there's big changes need to happen before these species can come back. But we do host the biggest apex predator in Europe, though, which is killer whales. We have lots of them around the Scottish coast. Not that I'll ever work with them, because they would scare the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Thank you for
thank you. Thank you.
I've got Margaret. Are you okay to be videoed, Margaret? Hopefully you can unmute if you wouldn't mind. Just add to spotlight.
Unmuted. Hello. Hi. Hey, thank you so much for this talk. I'm joining you from New York City.
Hello,
and
Margaret.
And by a very odd coincidence, just before this talk, I was on a webinar here in New York for rat contraception. You know, we are on the verge here with any luck of having a new law called Flacco's Law to protect New York City's wildlife. And this law is named after Flacco the owl, who became, you may have heard of Flacco because he became pretty famous worldwide for having escaped from the Central Park Zoo and actually lived wild in the city for 13 months before he finally succumbed to rodenticide poisoning. And as a consequence of that, and because Flacco had become so well known and just, you know, really adored, not only in the city, but really everywhere, more attention was brought to the subject of rodenticide poisoning. And so we're now at the point of having a rat contraception pilot program that's going to be introduced pretty soon. And it's being done by a nonprofit organization that has for years been working on developing a contraceptive for in pellet form that will be, you know, nice and, you know, not only appealing to the rats, but really, you know, good food. Like, you know, we're finally, New York City is wisening up, or something is happening, you know, where they're facing the reality that poisoning the rat and mice population in New York City is not working. So I mentioned this because I'd like to know if you do anything with contraceptives for rats and mice or other species, and just to let you know about this, because even though the pilot program is starting with this one particular company that's been involved with it, they will be opening up this program to competition out there. So if you have some way in which you'd like to join in,
well, I mean,
it would be great.
I think the concept idea is in theory good. This might surprise people, but I'm actually not a supporter of the contraceptive idea. Now I'll tell you why. Two issues with this. So let's say you have rats in your house in London and you use contraceptives on those rats. It's not going to solve your problem. You need, for urban areas, you need to be able to understand what the rats do and understand their psychology and behavior. So in a case like that, it's not going to solve your problem. The rats are still going to be there. And even though the rats won't breed, more rats will keep coming unless you deal with food sources. The rats will just keep coming to those areas. Unless you do the proofing, the rats going to keep coming to those areas. Now, the biggest issue, and this is, they've thought about doing something similar for grey squirrels up in Scotland, but it so far has been stalled because the issue they have, and this is a bigger issue with rats in urban areas, and very much like my slide about the bait boxes in the Netherlands and all the species which visit that bait box, there's no way that you can put a contraceptives in pellet form or any form and just target one species. If you start accidentally targeting shrews or voles or mice, which are not like different species of mice, which are not allowed to, you're going to have a negative impact on native species where by them getting access to it. And that's like with the red and grey squirrels in Scotland, they were going to try and use contraceptives on grey squirrels, but there's no way they could guarantee that pine martens weren't going to get it or red squirrels weren't going to get it, or even that the drug would dissolve within the animal and then not affect the animal that predates it. So there's always a secondary effect as well, which they don't have enough research on that to be able to do that in the UK. And as far as I understand at the moment, it's not legal in the UK. I love that they're trying to find a new non-lethal way of dealing with them, but it would only be a stick and plaster on a bigger problem. To solve these issues, you really need to understand the psychology and behavior, the motivators of the species. And sadly, with the contraceptives, I feel it would impact on non-target species too heavily, and that means would be to try and deal with rats breeding or stop them breeding too much, the other wildlife may have to suffer, and we couldn't support that.
Thank you. I
Well,
think.
so-
Yeah, Margaret,
no, you go. No, you go ahead. You go ahead,
I was
Brian.
going to say, I think remember from years ago there was a suggestion for the control of the pigeons, because we have the Trafalgar Square pigeons. I was involved with the support group. There was an issue, a question was raised: could they be using contraception for those? I know that for the deer in Richmond Park, I think somebody was suggesting contraception. I think that I thought the challenge was, you can't, it's not like with a human being. A woman can take a contraception one a day. An animal, the food is there, and you might get some have a lot of it, and some may have none of it, and then you end up potentially with another problem of doing some. Someone said Toronto uses contraception for pigeons. Someone has posted. Anyway, I think it's an interesting concept, but I don't know whether it works for all animals.
Yeah, that's the issue. And Toronto, again, pigeons you really don't need to use contraceptions for. They're quite easy to control. As in most species are quite easy to control. You control their food, you control their numbers. They breed to their food sources. So if you understand how the species work, you can tackle them that way more efficiently. And again, it's, if you're putting contraceptives out for pigeons in a baiting way, there's no guarantee other species are not going to take that food either. So thank you for that question, Margaret, and thanks for joining from New York. I do quite a few consultations for the New York area. I did one just 2 weeks ago with someone with rats over there. So I don't know how those people in stateside hear about us, but keep spreading the message.
Well, it would be really great to have you involved in this issue here, because as you know from New York, and we do have quite a population. It's something like what was it? 2 rats, I think it is, for every New Yorker. You might know the figure, but
lucky New Yorkers.
Thanks for the question, Margaret. Well,
thank you.
I've got Orsa. Are you happy to be videoed? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Add spotlight. Thank you.
Yeah. Just first quick comment about the wolves. I'm Swedish originally, and in Sweden there are lots of wolves. And the main comment are not people being scared about killed by wolves, but their dogs being killed by wolves. That's happened quite a lot, but that was a side thing. My question relates to very, very small animals. And I wonder if you have any tips for ants that like to come inside. Last summer, we had so many ants and it takes such a long time to move them in a nice way. So any tips would be welcome.
Again, see, I'm a really weird wildlife geek, Asa, and I love studying species on their level. So their psychology, their behavior, their motivations. So with ants, really good way to do it. Firstly, just observe them. They're coming in for a food source. So what will happen is you'll get one ant, he'll come in your kitchen and he'll find a nice little bit of jam or butter or a crumb and take it back. Now, if that food source is still there once you've done one trip, they'll go back again. Now, every time an ant comes out of his hole, goes to the food source, goes back again, it's laying a trail and it follows that scent trail back to where it's done. So the more
we tried wiping that, but you
can. I'll give you all the tips for this in a moment. The more that ant follows that scent trail, the stronger the scent trail gets. The stronger the trail, the more ants come in. So the way to do it is observe them, watch where they're going to, and watch where they go in, where their entry point is. And then what you need to do is then wait until the evening, because ants always go back in their nest at night time and have the bedtime stories, and off to sleep they go. And then you know where their entry point is. So then you seal the entry point. You then use either pure vinegar or white wine, pure lemon juice or white wine vinegar, and the chemicals of those help break down those chemical trails of the ants. And then you just remove the food source, and it usually is as simple as that. And you just got to spend that time to follow where that line or that ant goes, and they'll show you where their holes are. Seal them up.
They come in under the door.
Oh, it might be a bit tricky.
So, yeah.
There are ways you can do it. Just need to make sure your door is very, very flush. But it's just in your case, then I'd make sure there'd be no crumbs at all, because what will happen? Ants will come out their nest, and they typically they'll go out one way one day, one way the next, one way the next, one way the next. So if of all those different directions they're going on different days, if that one day they're going into yours, they find food, they're going to keep going back there. But what they do is, like many other species developers around the world, they almost work like a clock work circuit around their nest, so they don't deplete all the food sources at once. So they just be to happen the time they go into yours, they found some food, they're going to keep going back again.
Yeah.
But clean those floors when they're done in the evening with either lemon or the vinegar, and that should help stop them coming back in.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That's great.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks. Let me move the spotlight on that one. We've got Hazel. Hazel, are you okay to be videoed? Okay, you on mute?
Yeah.
Okay. Just add you on to as a spotlight. Thanks. What's your question, Hazel?
Hi. Thank you so much. It's amazing work you do.
Thank
You know, so many people I know go to these pest control companies, and it breaks my heart. I wanted to ask, you have a no-kill policy of any animals, is that right? Yeah.
That's indeed true. Yeah.
We have the same problem as one of your stories, is foxes pooing in the garden a lot. And I don't mind them being there. They don't hurt my dogs. Would they hurt a dog if they saw a dog, or?
Not necessarily. Well, if you think of it this way, and this way I always describe fox conflicts or worries with cats and dogs. By the time, let's say you got this time of year, by the time you've noticed there's a fox in your garden, the fox and your cat or your dog will know each other's been there for ages. So when people go, oh, we've got foxes there, we got cubs that just come out from underneath our shed. And my first reaction to, okay, so we're in May and there's cubs coming out now. I was like, is this the first time you notice them? And they'll say yes. And I'm like, well, foxes established their den sites for their breeding back in January, February time. So if they've been in your garden since January and February, and you only notice them now in May, you know, that's nearly 3-4 months down the line. And if nothing's happened to your cat or dog in that time, then you can just take that peace of mind that they know each other's there, they respect each other's boundaries, and you don't usually have anything to worry about.
Right, because when we went away, we were away quite a long time in the winter, and they seemed to know that, and they kept messing in the garden, and obviously coming in, we saw it on the camera. How, I mean, apart from I got this spray to keep them away, which they said is animal friendly, how can you stop them pooing in the garden?
Well, if they're pooing in your garden, you're unluckily you're on the boundary of several fox territories. So especially in the winter, so October time, the young get dispersed by the parents, so they've got to go and find their own territories. This causes territorial disputes. And if you're unlucky like yourself, Hazel, where your garden's probably smack bang in the middle of a crossroad of fox territories, they're all going to keep pooing there because they're going to keep scent marking. So what I would suggest doing would be lifting up the fowl, using hot soapy water to break down any of the scent chemicals that they're leaving there. And then you can use products like Scoot or Get Off My Garden to try and encourage, well, try and mask any of the last descent. If you neutralize the area, that usually does the trick. Otherwise, it's proofing your garden from foxes, as a last resort.
Okay, thanks very much.
You're most welcome.
And let's move that one. I'll do Paul Appleby. That may be the last question, but maybe Kevin might be happy to stay on a little bit longer. But let's just add on that one. Paul, hi there.
Hi, Kevin. Are you a one-man band? That is, obviously you're based in Scotland. So what happens if you got a phone call from Cornwall and say, can you come down and sort out our wildlife problem? Is there anyone in England or a bit closer that you can refer them to?
Sadly not, Paul. I am a one-man band, have been for all these years. If someone from Cornwall calls and asks me to come, I fit them in. So what I do, I split the country up into segments. So one segment, I'll go down to Manchester, Liverpool, do jobs there. At the beginning of the week, at the end of the week, I could be in Newcastle and County Durham. Then I'll be in Leeds the following week, or Bristol and Cardiff. So I split the country up and I do them in different segments, so I'm able to reach people. We are looking at having a franchise in London, and we'll build it on from there. So we have a vegan entrepreneur who's in the process of helping us set that up. So we're hoping to get that done as quick as we can, and then once we've got the first one up, we'll duplicate it into other areas and spread our range. But at the moment, it's me doing all the traveling, and to be honest, I love traveling. I love going to places in mid Cornwall or Derbyshire or Essex or up the Pennines in Yorkshire or Cumbria or the Scottish Highlands. I love the traveling and meeting my clients and helping them solve their jobs. No job has ever been the same. In all these 6,800 jobs, there's never been one which is a carbon copy. So I always know when I go into a job that's going to be completely different, and it's it's I have to. I always approach it like a CSI investigation. I need to understand exactly what's going on, where it's going on, why it's going on, and then put a plan to implement it. So, yeah, one-man band, Paul, a one-man band at the moment.
More like a phenomenon.
Thank you. I'll take that. That's a very good description.
Thank you. Nicole, you happy to be videoed? Yeah. Okay.
Hi. Yes.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm in Montreal, Canada, and I'm wondering a couple of things. For one thing, I absolutely love what you're doing. I think what you're doing is absolutely brilliant. It
Thank you.
reminds me of some of the work that Alison Hanson, who came on this earlier, has been doing with Rodenticide Free Ontario, and also reminded me a little bit of Coyote Watch Canada and the Fur Bearer Defenders, three different Canadian organizations. I was wondering a couple of things. One thing, are you doing anything about airports? Because I know airports, you made me aware of the airport problem, that airports kill all kinds of wildlife, and I'm wondering if you do any work at airports.
We've not done any airport work at the moment, Nicole. It's something I'd love to get into because you're right. They kill a lot of birds, ground nesting birds, hares, rabbits. They kill anything that goes potentially in the way. So you're right, that is a big issue. It's something I'd love to look into more because I think there is easy ways to do it. I mean, most of that, the airport culling is done as a precaution, not that there's any really need to. Glasgow Airport's not too far down the road, and I go and do a lot of nature watching out on the Clyde just behind it. There's always birds. I mean, there's no point even culling birds at airports, especially if you're in a migration route where birds are coming across there all the time. So unless they kill every single bird in the whole of Scotland, there's always going to be birds going over airports. So that's something that we could definitely look at, because I think airports are needlessly culling birds and other animals.
I would agree. And another thing I'm wondering is, are you going to be starting a franchise in Canada? Because it would be really good if you did.
Yeah, there's always the option of having one out there. I think our progress at the moment is going to be London, then Amsterdam and Netherlands, and then we'll look further afield. We do get a lot of work in North America, from Canada and from the United States. So that would be an idea to at one point get a branch over there. If you volunteer and let me know, and I could train you up on the ways to do it. But yeah, the idea and the dream is to have this in as many countries and counties, regions around the world, so we can show people that you don't need to kill animals to solve wildlife issues.
Very briefly,
The other thing is,
what experience or expertise does one need for you to take them on board, to have them as part of the franchise if you're doing that?
That's a really good question. I'm an anomaly, I guess, because as a teenager, when my friends were trying to go to house parties to hook up with girls, I was out looking at rats and snakes and looking for birds and bugs, and I just kind of self-taught a lot of my knowledge. Like, I used to keep a wildlife journal as a 14-year-old, and I actually helped a neighbor who had a rabbit problem in their garden, and I wrote it in my journal. And I think it was like 12 years later, and I was like, hang on, I did my first job when I was 14 without even realizing it. It would take someone who is willing to go the full mile for animals. It would take someone who's not afraid of getting dirty, doing long hours, hard work, but ultimately has a really good understanding and a passion for wildlife. You really need to understand how a rat thinks, or wasp behaves, or a flea behaves in a situation. You need to understand, you need to be able to think like them. And once you can do that, then you're in the best position to be able to try and disrupt activities. But if I did the franchises, I would be teaching people these skills anyway. It's not something you can pick up a book and really learn. It's about learning in the field, as to say.
Okay. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Okay. Are you okay for another one question?
I'll go one more. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go back to John. It's just add on a. Okay, and let me just add spotlight. Okay. Unmute, please, John.
Yep. Funny enough, I was going to ask about fleas and bugs, bed bugs, and then I thought, no, that's silly. But then you just did mention fleas. So, do you have a way of dealing with fleas and bed bugs? And if that is a silly question, well, you do a lot of traveling. Just wondering whether you can use an electric car, electric van. Does it work out?
Okay, I'll do the car van one first. We've just recently got a new vehicle. We looked at electrics, but because the distances I travel, I can travel easily up to 500 miles a day some days.
Yeah.
I when I'm going further distances, I tend to use public transport to try and be a bit more environmentally friendly. At the moment, we're struggling to find an electric vehicle which would be able to cover the mileage I need to. So like if I'm starting off in Glasgow and ending up working in Edinburgh, Dundee and Aberdeen, I'd have to stop a couple of times on the way up for a few hours to recharge. I just wouldn't be able to do the service.
Yeah.
I mean, that will change. The mileage on electric vehicles will get better. And if that comes around again at the next point, I think we'll probably would look at getting an electric vehicle. Bed bugs, that's not a silly question at all. We are researching bed bugs. I actually have a huge book. It's known as the Bed Bug Bible. It's a pest control book, but it's got studies from all over the world about bed bugs, behavior, psychology. You wouldn't think bed bugs have psychology, but they do. So it's my job to learn that and then to figure out how we then would put it into action. Because the thing is, I could probably get your bed bugs in one area safely. It's about how I contain them alive because they're very good climbers and what you do with them when you got them. So I don't know if I'd have to buy an old house and just fill it with mattresses and put bed bugs in there and leave them to be. But with fleas, we have been trialing some flea work and it's been quite successful actually. So we're still working on those trials. It's basically we found a way. The trouble is it's using a candle being left at night on water in buildings, which is a fire hazard. So unless someone sits with that flame all night, we need to find a way to replicate the flame because it needs the light and the heat to be able to track. So the idea, John, basically, if you, let's say you had fleas in your living room, if you, at night time, you put a big tray of water with a candle, and please no one try this because it is a fire risk. If you put the candle and the water in there, the fleas will be attracted to the heat and the light source of that candle and the movement of the flickering of the flame. And because fleas are so very light, if they land on the water next to the candles, they are suspended on top of the water, so they don't drown. So you can live catch fleas. The only thing we need to do is find a way to replicate the heat and the light of a real flame to make it safe to use in households. But we've tried it with me doing nighttime work in several businesses which had fleas in them, and me saying to the manager and the director and the CEO of the company going, "Now, this may sound mad, but can I spend a night in your shop with some candles to get your fleas?" And he's like, "What are you going to do, you fleas?" He's like, "Can I live catch them?" And I managed to do it, so it worked, and we actually got all the fleas out of their store because we attracted them all to what they wanted, which was the body heat. And it's lucky I don't taste nice to fleas, so they never bite me. So they were going straight into our live catch flea traps, and yeah. So I come up with so many mad ideas, John, and I'll keep going. Like over the years, I've found a way that I can pick up a wasp nest with all the wasps in it without protective equipment, and that's because, like I said, about learning their psychology and behavior. And just for anyone listening, please don't try this at home. Definitely one of those warnings. Do not try this at home, kids, as they say. I've learned the triggers and the motivators of wasps. So I know I can pick up a wasp nest with all the wasps in it and safely put it into a container, take it away and reset it somewhere else, and they can continue just as normal. It takes them a few hours to recalibrate their navigation sense, because in their minds they were here. It's like me pick you out of in your sleep, John. I pick you out of your bed, plonk you in Birmingham, you come out the front door. I'm like, hang on a minute, I weren't here before, and you kind of have to get your bearings again. But we figured a way to do that with wasps, and it's been really, really successful. So we're looking at expanding on that idea. But again, that takes a lot of bravery and a lot of just understanding even the smallest movement of, because when wasps are disturbed, if you can read their body language, and again, this sounds really crazy, reading the body language of a wasp. To me, it's completely normal. To most people, they think it's completely mad. But I've learned their behaviors and their triggers and their motivators. And once you know them, then you can use that to your advantage without having to cause them any harm.
Wow.
That question.
Amazing.
Thanks very much. I'm going to bring this formal part of the meeting to a close. I'm going to say a really big thank. I mean, it was a fascinating talk. Absolutely. I've got a few more questions we haven't got time for, or maybe after the formal part. I'm going to ask everybody if you could mind unmuting, give a round of applause to our speaker.
Thank you.
Doing great work, Kevin. Thanks very much for joining us. Let me close. Just bear with me a second. Just stop recording.